Thank you very much for joining us, and hello to all of our people who are tuning in from Russia, UK, Europe, and US and elsewhere. Today we're talking about retail in the time of Corona. Retail is probably one of the most interesting sectors to look at in terms of the response, how people are coping. It's the people who are in the front lines, and so it's a great sector to be talking about, and we have great people to help us talk about that. We have the CFOs from three of the leading and probably most interesting retailers in Russia, Svetlana Demyashkevich from X5 Retail Group. We have Ekaterina Sokolova from, Ekaterina Sokolova from M.Video-Eldorado Group, Daniil Fedorov from OZON, and we have Artur Galimov, who's #1 rated analyst for retail in Russia from Sova Capital. So I'm also joined here by Ben Aris, the managing editor of BNE IntelliNews, who's going to be co-moderating this discussion with me. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Ben to kick off our discussion. But basically, we're looking at what's really been happening in the last couple of months, what's really happening, and then even more importantly, where do we go from here, the months to come, and what does retail look like after we get out of all of this? These are some of the themes that we're hoping to explore today. And with that, I hand over to Ben.
Hi, thanks for everyone for turning up. I guess the first question is, we've been hit by this massive crisis. Everybody around the world has been locked down for at least a month, and in some countries more. As retailers, your whole business turns around people turning up to the shops to buy things. And of course, food and a lot of the goods that you provide are essential. People have to go out. I was wanting to ask each of you if you could briefly describe what were your immediate reactions, because the problem is bringing people together in close proximity could possibly lead to infection. Nevertheless, they still need to come to the stores. What could you do in order to ensure both the public health, safety, and of course your own employees? Maybe we should start with X5, with Svetlana.
Yeah, that's what I was going to propose. Yeah. So, for us, the situation, I think, started to develop quite actively in March. We first saw peaking demand in our online, Перекресток online, in our online operations, and then in offline stores. And the peak was in middle of March, 2-3 days from March 15th to 17th. Actually, we had a big pressure on our logistics, and the biggest task for us was to ensure that just the shelves are not empty, and that we can provide uninterrupted supplies to our customers. And of course, you're right that the biggest priority for us also in that period is to ensure the safety of both our employees and customers in the stores. For that, we are providing all our employees with personal protection equipment, masks, gloves, and we also have disinfections liquids in the stores. We do regular disinfections within the stores using the external cleaning companies, and we do also regular tests of our employees if we have any reason to think that one of them may be sick. And of course, if we see that there is a contact between the sick employee and the other people in the shift, we change the shift fully. And the new shift of fully healthy employees is coming to the store. So that, of course, was a big planning effort and exercise for us in March. We actually started to prepare for this back in end of February, because we already saw these trends happening in Europe. So we started to making our additional supplies in our dark stores. And also we started to think about different scenarios of how we should react in the stores, in the distributional centers. For example, in distributional centers, what we came up with is that we splitted our shifts of people of from 300 to 400 people working in distributional centers into small groups, and make sure that they don't interact between each other. Also to be sure that if one of the employees is sick, we can only change one of the small group, not the whole shift for the distribution center.
Okay.
And yes, I should give the possibility to speak to my colleagues.
So I was going to follow up with Ekaterina. At M.Video, again, consumer electronics, big store-based business. I mean, I imagine you put in a lot of similar measures. Is that the case?
Yes, thank you, and good evening, everyone. Well, actually, the situation, the crisis mode, is, to my mind, is kind of an exciting opportunity for the businesses to make a very good self-test. I would put it like that. I think every business is making their own checklist and making their own kind of tick box exercise, whether they are able to pass this test or not pass this test. And I think in terms of like the key areas where we are checking up, making our own checkups, the first one is actually the sustainability of our business models. That's the first one. The second is actually the attitude towards people and customers, and that's for sure. And I will give a little bit of information on what we do in this area. I think the third one is also another thing which is actually very important, is ability and flexibility to work in a survival mode in a different way, being really quick, flexible, being able to do partnerships with other companies. And probably the fourth one, which is more like finance related things, is like liquidity issues, credit portfolio optimizations, ability to manage costs, to cut budgets. I think the fourth one is probably the easy one, because we passed through a crisis, different crises in Russia, and I think we're pretty much used to this type of things, and I think we can manage that well. But in terms of the first three, it's pretty much a big challenge for the companies, especially for the ones who are in non-food sector, and we definitely one of the players in non-food. So I think one of the key challenges was the business model, and we are excited to say that through this crisis situation, we kind of moved to the situation when we are fully online company. Currently, in terms of the total sales, 90% of our sales is online. And that's exciting. I mean, we're very excited, and that's incredible. Out of this 90%, of course, we make sure that we do all the sales contactless. Either you do it through a pickup in the store, or you do it in our mobile app, or you do it in web. We make sure that it goes contactless, it goes as mobile as possible through the smartphone, and it goes cashless. I think all these three type of things are one of our key priorities. Attitude to customers and employees is important as well. And of course, we make all the safety measures that Svetlana mentioned for all our employees, that's for sure. But we also make sure that the customers feel, safe and properly served, because we will all remember these crisis times. People are stressed, and you need to make sure you deliver proper service, because people will remember if you don't do it well.
Right. And last but not least, of the stores, Daniil at OZON, and you have an e-commerce business anyways. So in a way, everybody's turned to you and the other two big players, and shopping online. But surely that puts a lot of strain in your business. I mean, have you seen a massive uptick or a large uptick as people have switched to ordering stuff online?
Yes, hi Ben. Look, I think yes, of course we have seen an uptick. I mean, we've been focusing for the last 5 to 10 years to become like a big multi-category player. So with the high assortment, yes, we are basically the point of go-to destination for shoppers right now. So we have seen an uptick, and I think it also, as you mentioned, that comes with a lot of challenges. So we have seen an increased demand. So that brings basically a necessity to scale up. So we we've been lucky that we developed quite big infrastructure, and we were actually started early preparations this year for high season in fourth quarter. So we opened one of the biggest fulfillment centers in Russia last year, so that helped a lot. Second, we started hiring actually a lot of people from industries which are not doing that well. So that there was basically a special program for that. And I think also what helped a lot is I think basically big partnerships with big retail chains, and there was recently news that we partnered with M.Video, and I think that also indicates the transformation that happens overall in retail, and also of course a lot of work with smaller businesses. And when there was announcement of restrictions basically of self-isolation in Russia, I think on 26th of March alone we had 600 sellers registered on our marketplace platform. So I think that all that helps, in terms of bringing goods, in terms of scaling. So that helps a lot. And of course, safety is very important. So that's actually comes first. And it starts, as my colleagues mentioned, in the production facilities, which is for us fulfillment centers. And I think all these measures that were mentioned, we use. But also, there were a few very interesting transformational things on the delivery side. So first of all, we turned off post-payment completely. So if you look at Russia, let's say 6 years ago, it was a post-payment e-commerce company. I think if you look at the media, you would see that Amazon just 2 years ago or something launched post-payment. It was always pre-payment. For Russia, it was the other way around. So for now, all sales that we have, all prepaid. So you don't spend time interacting with the courier. That's one. Second, which is also very interesting for Russian e-commerce in particular, Russia is a country where normally you meet courier, right? It's never leave at the doorstep service. You meet the courier. This is not very comfortable for customers. This is not very good for utilization of couriers. It takes a lot of effort. So for now, I mean, we introduced contactless delivery, basically living at the doorstep service. And we actually introduced it very early. We introduced it in August last year. And until end of last year, it was a couple percentage points of total, right? So the adoption was not that great. But with the outbreak that we see right now, at least half of our deliveries comes through their contactless, right? So people just leave at the doorstep, prepaid parcels. It's very kind of Amazon-like model, like modern, like I would say Western world e-commerce model, which is actually helpful for the business and for the customers.
Do the packages ever get stolen?
No, we actually, we guarantee that we're gonna reimburse if there is, if something wrong happens, and I think that's a normal, I would say, anxiety of customers about this service. But no, I mean, I think we actually don't have any single complaint that something was stolen. Yeah. So I think it works well.
If I can move on to Artur, the statistics, I mean, reporting on this whole retail is still in catch-up mode, because we're getting the numbers out for March, and the disappointment is that actually the first quarter of Russia retail was doing really well. I mean, real incomes have been falling, stagnating for the last 6 years, and in the last 3 months there was actually a fast pickup. It looked like Russia was recovering on the path to growth. And yet, of course, that's going to be totally undone now. But companies like X5, you guys just reported your figures, and you saw a big pickup in March. So there's been a sort of corona-related boost as everyone stocked up for what they assumed was going to be isolation. But Artur, just how bad is it going to be? I mean, there's been a big bump, and now there's going to be a big drop-off, or what's going to happen? Coming in a minute, Sveta.
We think that a big part of these new customers who joined us, for example, in our online operations, because we also have, apart from offline stores, we have our online supermarket Перекресток.ru, and we also have now express delivery from Пятерочка and Перекресток, which is our proximity format and supermarket format. And we actually see quite a big growth there, above all our expectations. For example, in express delivery, which we just started in the beginning of this year, we already have more than 10,000 orders per day, and it's a very scalable model. And we think that a lot of customers, after using that during the pandemic situation, will continue to use it post-COVID, as we say.
Right.
In addition
I want to come on to the knock-on after the pandemic dies away. Artur, if you could please comment on what you think is going on in terms of what become this sort of roller coaster ride in retail.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, to start with, Russian food retail obviously started the year at quite a positive note, and this was exacerbated in March. I think that's the first kind of the crisis when we saw that people massively increased purchases of not only non-food but also food. But obviously, it's I think it's a temporary effect. So far, we're seeing that April trading also shows elevated demand, although in terms of the sales mix, I think it looks more normalized relative to what it was in March. But going forward, obviously, I think there are quite material risks of some sort of a consumer downturn and trading down that we may see in the second half of the year. So far, official statistics only showed wages and consumer incomes dynamics in February and March, which wasn't that bad, but obviously it's just too early to be reflected in the numbers. But I think there are no doubts that given certain issues with employment and erosion of consumer income, overall consumer sentiment is very much likely to deteriorate in the second half of the year, which should be followed by some sort of a trading down in the, I think, base case scenario, or even lower consumption volumes in the worst case scenario, which is a little bit less likely, and hopefully we'll get to steer clear of this. But obviously, I think in a sense, there is a risk that very strong first quarter and April results could be overshadowed by weaker second half of the year. I mean, weaker relative to initial expectations. And just to give you some context, I think looking at official statistics in March, in terms of both food and non-food, actual sales exceeded my estimates by around 4%, which means that it looks like people spent additional 110 billion rubles more than they would in the normal environment. And that means that a significant amount of pent-up demand has been satisfied, basically. So it looks likely that people will restrain from large spending going forward.
So I'd like to actually, if we can, I'd like to take the discussion. First of all, thank you for all the answers so far. That's given us a good picture of where we are today. And now what I'd like us to do is to try and sort of cast our minds into the future and sort of see what kinds of changes we're going to continue to see over the course of this year and beyond. And so first of all, I'll come back to our three retailers. We'll start with Svetlana. Just, you know, what do you think in terms of some of the trends that we have been seeing in terms of consumer preference, spending, and so on? What do you think is going to continue to hold after we get out of the current crisis?
Well, I think I already mentioned further development of online, and of course we do think that you know, this situation will give additional boost to all online operations in both food and non-food. So we do in our strategy already discuss the forecasts for you know, high investments in that direction of our business. In addition to that, I agree that there are risks. I agree with you that there are risks of slowdown in income generation by our consumers in the second half of the year. I think it's the biggest worry for everybody. But for food retail, I think it will be compensated by, at least partly compensated by inflow of customers from HoReCa. Even after the lockdown, I would expect that people will still think about their safety, and you know, the consumption patterns will be affected, I'm afraid, until the year end at least. And in addition to that, during the crisis, we usually see quite significant consolidation of the market. And I think also for us and for other leading retailers, the decrease in income of population will be at least partially compensated by the effects of consolidation from smaller players in modern retail and also from traditional retailers.
So I'd like to come back and come on to M.Video-Eldorado and also OZON to get that perspective in terms of, you know, how the future of the industry starts to look different now as a result of some of the changes and trends that we've seen. And I'll throw in an additional question to think about. If we accept that there is going to be a significant structural shift towards online, I have a question. What happens to the stores and the physical space and the physical infrastructure? So maybe Ekaterina, I can come on to you.
Yes, thank you, Tom. Well, actually, we definitely understand that there will be, and we expect that there will be a shift, a transition in the customer behavior in the future. But like when I started, you know, commenting on the crisis situation in general, I mentioned that it's a good test for every company in terms of the sustainability of the business model. We have a strategy in M.Video-Eldorado, which is called One Retail. What that means actually, that means that we have no channels anymore for our customers. I mean, we never considered ourselves, well, already for several years didn't consider ourselves as a traditional offline retailer. Our online sales comprise more than 50%, and we are the largest e-com player in consumer electronics segment. But what's more important is that customers actually interact and have different touch points with the company through different channels. They're using mobile apps, they're using web, they're using stores, by the way, for different purposes, for pickup, for getting some advice, for just feel and touch experience. What we are seeing right now is that actually all this is absolutely seamless. I mean, customers, they can start searching for products in online, in web, they can start the transaction in mobile app, and then they can finish the transaction picking up the product in the stores. In our strategy, stores were not kind of part of the offline channel as it's usually called. It was part of the online strategy development. So I think that the companies that have this online agenda as being one of the biggest priority will actually survive in the future. We definitely have. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're happy to say that 90% of the total sales, and some days, by the way, our total sales are not different from the previous year, 90% of our sales is online. And that's really exciting. In terms of like kind of behavior, people are moving to smartphones. They are definitely going to mobile. People are more and more using cashless transactions. I mean, that's for sure. That's another trend that we will work with. And I think this crisis was also a very good test for all of us in terms of how we can build partnerships. I mean, I'm happy to say that we are partnering with OZON, Daniil, thank you, with Svetlana, X5, thank you, because we are doing partnership with X5. We're using Peterочка stores as a pickup opportunity. We're doing partnership with Post of Russia, with the DPD, different last mile solutions with Get Taxi and Yandex Taxi. And that all happened within just 1-2 weeks. That's amazing. I mean, we were getting prepared for those partnerships for, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years, but that all went live within 2 weeks. And I think that's kind of also another new reality. We need to think of partnerships in the future, not only ecosystems, nice words, but partnerships as well.
No, absolutely. And yes, Ben.
I was going to jump in and a follow-up question, actually aimed at Daniil, that I was curious to see that obviously everybody has an online strategy, and in Russia it's been going very fast, but of course this crisis has catalyzed things. To what extent, how far has it gone And to what extent can the logistics systems that you've all been building cope with this? I mean, I know, for example, that OZON's been heavily investing in the logistics, but I think online retail still only accounts for about 4.5% of the total retail, and it's been doubling every 2 years or so. It was expected to get to 8% next year, I think it was. But aren't we talking about a rapid acceleration and a much larger share of retail now going online? Daniil?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Look, I think, first of all, I think what we see right now is a dramatic change towards, of attitude towards the e-commerce. So that's, and to online in general, right? Even the most conservative parts of the world, are changing their attitude. I just saw the news that, Oscar will consider this or next year films which are going online. That was never the case. You were supposed to be in cinemas, before. And on top of that, and it's not just, the customer, it's also about the government, for example. In Russia, we have numerous, there were a lot of things we've been fighting for, on the JAR side. And, we see that, we are welcome today. There were a lot of changes actually happening. We have, there is a big step towards liberalization of pharma sales online. A lot of things are actually, so a lot of tailwinds there. Because now it's not just something, online. It's not like several IT guys are doing something online. It's basically, it turns into being the basic stuff, very system important, I would say, things. So it's changing a lot. In Russia, there is no, in our mind, there is no e-commerce. It's early days. We have, 4 or 5% of total retail. That's nothing. China is 25 or plus %. And in Q1, it's probably over 30% online. This is the future.
Maybe Artur's got a view on this. It's going very fast, but can you put some numbers on it? As Daniil was just saying, that actually the share of online is still relatively low compared to some of DN's developed markets. Do you think this is going to rapidly accelerate this, and the nature of retail is going to change, or what?
Yeah, look, I think first of all, yes. It's the nature of retail is changing. You cannot ignore online, you cannot ignore internet. And I think strongest players, there is no such notation today is like offline store, right? Offline retail. It's offline, it's the boundaries between online and offline are a bit vague today, right? So, and my colleagues who are in the call today, they are all doing a lot of, I think, good job, good progress with being online. Still value proposition is a bit different, and the models are different, but you cannot ignore online. So it's, a lot of sales of so-called offline retailers are online sales today. For us, of course, it's going to change. We were estimating that the share of online sales by 2025 will reach 10% of total retail sales, which means that market will gonna double to triple roughly. So that means and that's a huge uptick that creates about $30 billion opportunity for us. And for that, of course, you need logistics, as you mentioned. We have a $300 million investment plan. We opened a lot of fulfillment centers. We also developed last mile delivery, especially today with courier delivery, share picking up. We also need to invest in courier delivery. So that is, of course, required. So that used to be biggest bottleneck in Russia. And this is something that, we are actively working on now. And so far it pays off because we've been actually developing infrastructure beforehand. So we've been, as I mentioned, we've been preparing for Q4 already. And that helps because, we are able to manage uptick in volumes, but we will continue. Again, this is just the beginning. I don't know if you heard of OZON before this call. But I'm pretty much sure it's, what we're aiming to build is a $10+ billion company. And that's very, you mentioned such company.
if we hadn't heard them a few months ago, we definitely have now. Let me jump in, Ben, and ask a question to Artur to sort of follow on. We've talked about partnerships and how this might be one of the strategies for the future for retailers. I think that when we look at the Russian retail space, say in 5 years' time, goes without saying that the likes of X5 or M.Video, OZON are going to be key players in that sector, but maybe not everyone will be. Not all of the names will still be there, and the industry, in terms of the composition, might look quite different. I'll ask Artur and then ask the other speakers if they'd like to provide an additional comment. How do you see the competitive space? Who are the main players? Not necessarily in names, but what do the retailers look like?
First of all, I think it's amazing to see how the current situation gave a dramatic boost to the transformation of the retail industry, both food and non-food segments. And speaking of partnerships, I think if we recall this partnership between X5 and M.Video, this could give a very interesting perspective of how future hybrid retail formats may look like in the future, whereby conventional boundaries between offline and online food and non-food effectively disappear. So basically, the key target is to give the customer as much choice and as much convenience as possible, whereby he can come to the Peterочka store, pick up order from OZON or from M.Video, and no matter whether it happens online or offline. So I think this kind of a strategy, one retail concept, which M.Video is implementing, will gradually kind of span other players and other industries. Getting back to Tom's previous questions about stores, I think it's not the choice of between online and offline to open stores or to develop digital channels. The stores should continue to be a very solid and complementary to any retail business. So just to give you some figures, I think if we're talking about e-commerce in general, that's quite insignificant percentage. But if you're talking about food retail, I think it's less than 0.3, 0.2% of retail turnover last year. X5 is one of the largest players in online food market. I think Perikrovsk online accounts for just 0.4, right? Less than half percentage point. So there's a huge way to go, obviously. In terms of competitive landscape, obviously the current situation should give a competitive edge to those players who started to prepare for this in advance, started to develop online channels, pretty much the companies that we see today on the call. And that gives also a very nice market consolidation opportunity, because those people who never used online before are effectively forced to use this service at the moment. And well, pretty likely that they will appreciate the convenience and will stay online. And those people may not necessarily come to, let's say, Perikrovsk online or M.Video from their offline stores, but they may be coming from those players who do not have this online option available. So I wouldn't exaggerate the impact from increasing online penetration for this year, maybe even for 2021. But in the midterm, obviously, this creates quite a lot of scope for the companies to keep growing and to mitigate slower pace of growth in offline in their mature businesses.
Artur, thanks very much. Let me give a chance to Svetlana to give a comment, and then I'll come on to you, Ekaterina and Daniil, for a quick view on some of these issues.
Well, I think that omni-channel strategy, what Ekaterina was talking about, is the key for all players who are both present in offline and online, and for us, of course, also. And a good example of it is our express delivery, which we do both from Peterочka and Perikrovsk, and it doesn't require any additional capex. It doesn't require any additional investments if you compare with building dark stores for e-commerce, for example. And in that way, it's a very scalable model which we can roll out very quickly. And of course, we are starting with food as our core category, but you can imagine with such frequency of contacts with the clients, I think this omni-channel story has very significant opportunities with the infrastructure like we have, for example, of 16,000 stores, and we can consider them as ready dark stores for food. So it just depends on the demand we have from our customers, and we're ready to roll out this model. At the same time, Artur is right, and I will support him that it's very exciting, and of course, we're also internally very excited about everything related to online. But for food, of course, for many years, still offline will continue. Biggest part of operation, our biggest focus, and we have millions of loyal customers, and of course, we want to give them the opportunity to have the best, shopping in our segment. Including offline shopping.
Thank you, Svetlana. Ekaterina, did you have an additional view on this?
Yeah, I just want to add that actually, we all need to consider and make sure that our customer is happy. And we make sure that when the customer is contacting us through any touch point, whether it's web, mobile app, or store, he gets the outstanding experience. I think it's very difficult now to differentiate between the channels. As I mentioned before, we have this no channel strategy. And let's have an example. For example, the customer comes to the store just to see whether he's interested to buy this or that product. And our sales assistant, which actually has a special mobile device with an online shelf, comes up to the customer and gives him some advice and goes through the online shelf together with the customer. And they pick up the product through online shelf in the mobile device of the sales assistant. What is this? Is it online or offline? It's all very much linked, and it's very much complementary, because our sales assistant is using mobile device with an online shelf in it. They are screening all the opportunities in a mobile device, and they're using all the kind of attributes that are available in the online channel. But they are doing this in the store. So I think the concept of no channels is an important one, which is our One Retail strategy. And I think there was one important question that you, Tom, raised, and Ben also asked about what is the role of the stores actually. Do we need the stores, generally speaking? And what we do in our strategy is that our stores, first of all, they are just one of the touch points for the customer. It's the customer's choice to come to the stores and do some kind of feel and touch, get the advice. If the customers do not need that, we can survive with our stores easily. But the stores in our model, they are used also as part of the logistics infrastructure. And they help us to make sure that the product is available for the customer, and we can deliver the product really quick. Because if you don't have the stores all across Russia, it is very difficult to make sure that the customer gets the product really quick. So the stores are kind of logistics hubs in our business model as well. And that's also, we think, is one of our key success factors. Can
I jump in? Can I jump in and ask a last question and to the three retailers, and if you keep your answers brief because we're running out of time. But what is the main constraints going forward? You've all been investing heavily into logistics, but the game has changed, or at least accelerated, and the logistics and delivery possibilities are now much more important. But that also plays against the inertia, the whole movement of shoppers online. Again, it's been catalyzed. It's got a big boost from this crisis, but there's still a certain amount of inertia that people still are not entirely comfortable with shopping online. Of those two things, which is the bigger constraint in terms of growing the online business?
Yeah, if I start, yes. Look, the biggest one is still, I would say, infrastructure, right? So we are showing a very dramatic growth rates for now, right? And again, you know, the size which we're gonna reach this year, I mean, it's still gonna be very small. Should be 10 times higher. To do that, of course, we need infrastructure. You know, still Russia is a big country. And still we need to get close to customers, put in fulfillment centers near the customers. And fulfillment center is not a usual offline store, offline retail warehouse. It's like a production facility, which should take like 2 hours to create a parcel with like 4 items in there. And this is, you know, the biggest bottleneck. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bottleneck. I would say it's like an investment, right? So it's money required, to do that. So that's number one. On top of that, when you grow, when you double your sales or triple your sales, execution is also very important. And given that the industry is just developing, you know, finding talents, you know, who can actually execute. So these are two things. I mean, so this for us, I mean. And talents, you know, across the board, right? So in the commercial function, in finance, and predominantly in IT. So I think these two things, like, so these are the key challenges I would say for us to overcome.
Okay, Svetlana, can I ask you again? The business, the logistics. I'm assuming that the distribution logistics for the big cities, particularly Moscow and St. Pete, are fairly well developed. But as Daniil just said, the country is huge, and if you're going to roll out this for the whole country, I mean, doesn't that remain an issue? Would you say you're satisfied with the millionki, the big urban centers, but yeah, there's still a lot to do? Daniil, let's Svetlana answer.
Yeah, sure.
For us, we have two models in online delivery. First is Перекресток online, and there the bottleneck is very similar to e-commerce because it's just FMCG food online proposition, supermarket. But we have big hopes now for our express delivery model, as I'm saying, because we do already have infrastructure for that. We have offline stores and we have our logistics for online stores, and we can just deliver food from the offline stores. So that's, I think, a big growth point for us. In addition to that, I think probably being the big company with 250,000 employees, probably the biggest challenge for us is the speed of development and the agility. So that's what we are trying to achieve and trying to learn for last 2-3 years, and I think we are quite successful in that comparing with our traditional competition. But we see now that we have new competitors like Yandex, OZON, and other e-commerce players and other IT companies. So I think for us, this is one of the challenges: digital transformation and being faster, higher time to market. We're very focused on that. We're investing in that, and I think we will be very successful in that, but it takes some time.
Okay. And Katya, for your business, consumer electronics, I mean, don't you have the most difficult task in terms of both logistics, delivering, what some things are quite large and bulky, and at the same time getting the customer to buy that stuff online, not necessarily coming onto the store? Which for you is the bigger constraint?
Yes, thank you, Ben. Actually, I don't think that we have any constraints logistic-wise. I think the only constraint is actually the mindset of our people. I think our people are pretty much innovative. I mean, they're using internet. The penetration is high in our country. They are going mobile, that's for sure. But still, we have that mindset inside of kind of feeling a little bit of unsafe when you're doing some kind of online purchases, or when you're not sure that if you do the transaction cashless, something will go wrong. And I think that probably is one of the constraints that we should work with. We need to make sure that our customers feel a little bit more safe and we can move forward together with them. But all the rest is the proper strategy and the proper execution. I think, really strong teams of professionals can do both well. And we need to work a little bit with the mindset of our people so that they help us to execute our strategies.
Okay.
Artur, I'll give you a chance for a final closing statement or quick observation from your side, and then we'll wrap. Artur?
Right. Actually, I would agree that even though internet penetration is pretty high in Russia, things are quite different in regions relative to Moscow and St. Petersburg. Until recently, consumers still enjoyed visiting stores and shopping malls. So that was part of the entertainment kind of thing during the weekend. So in the current situation, this is kind of a natural boost and incentive for those customers to try online. And from this perspective, I think it's also an important stress test for retailers to make sure that the service is convenient, prompt, timely, and creates a nice feedback from customers so that they will stay online, and for retail chains to expand their online operations outside Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other large cities to middle-sized towns and smaller locales. As we discussed, penetration of online is still pretty low in general, not to mention food retail relative to developed European countries, for instance.
So thank you very much. And I think with that, I'd like to thank all of us, because I think we have some great insights here. Artur, thank you. And as maybe a special thank you to our three retailers, X5, OZON, and M.Video. Please keep doing what you're doing. We need it. And may you and all of your people stay very safe. So thank you very much for everything. And thanks everyone for being online with us. From us and from BNE, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was very glad to see you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.